Here's a basic version of Danny Boy. But I could reharmonize that song so that it now sounds maybe something like this. So when you begin to change chords to a song, we call that reharmonizing. And in this video, I'm going to show you some of the tools that I use to reharmonize any song. So first, we're going to talk about diatonic substitutions. So when we say diatonic, that sounds like a fancy word, but it's really just simply referring to the notes in a scale. So I'm playing Danny Boy in the key of C. When I'm in the key of C, that means that the notes that I'm using are C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. Okay. I also like to think of these notes in numbers. So I think of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then I'm back at 1. I also like to know the chords starting on each degree of that scale. So this is chord number 1, and then chord number 2, chord 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay. A lot of songs, usually when you break them down to their skeleton, you'll find that they use diatonic chords. So in the first example of Danny Boy that I played, I used nothing else except just those diatonic chords. So for example, I said, so that right there is chord 1. I'm in the key of C, so that's chord 1 that I'm playing in my left hand. So, oh Danny Boy. I stay on chord 1, and now I go to chord 4. In fact, let me play the melody. Let me play the melody up there so that you can see my chords. So it was chord 1 for quite a long time. Then we go to chord 4, and chord 4 again, back to chord 1 again, and then chord 5. So sometimes chord 1, 4, and 5 are known as primary chords because they're the main chords that a lot of songs would be built from. Okay, so you can go throughout history, and almost in any culture, you'll find that a lot of the songs will simply use these 3 chords. Okay. But what musicians do to make the song sound more interesting is they can reharmonize. Okay. So I'm also going to refer to chord 1 as the tonic. So this is really our home. Okay. So this is our tonal center. The song always feels it has to come back here. Da da da. Oh Danny Boy, I love you so. So this is our home. Okay, so our song starts there, it also ends there. Okay, and then when we're going to chord 4, we're temporarily moving away from home because you can feel that this wants to come back here. Okay, so, and then when we go to chord 5, not only does it feel like we want to go home, it almost feels like, my goodness, we have to go home. Okay, so in this chord, you feel lots of tension. It feels like it wants to go there. Okay, so before we even talk about reharmonizing, let's talk about the 7th chord, because that's a cool tool to use. There's 2 places that I like to use a 7th chord when I'm harmonizing or reharmonizing any song. So one of those moments is anytime I'm going from chord 1 to chord 4. So if I want to go from C to F, I'm actually just going to play inversions for now. So I'm going to go to that F. Okay. So, oh Danny boy, what I can do to give you the feeling that I'm going to chord 4 is I'll add the 7th. And the 7th is simply the note B flat. So, oh Danny boy, so that's C. This chord is now C7. Da, da, dee, da, 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 da. So in almost any song, if you come across a situation where you have to go from chord 1 to chord 4, feel free on that one chord to make that one chord a 7th chord. Okay. You could have been playing Amazing Grace, how sweet. See how that 7th chord there just added a little bit more color and a feeling of moving to chord 4. Okay. So that's one trick that I just want to put out there before we even start reharmonizing. So I said firstly, when you go from chord 1 to 4, feel free to use that 7th. But another good place is anytime you're playing chord 5, like in this case, chord 5 is G, right? You can also add the 7th because it's such a nice way to go back to chord 1. Okay, so there's chord 5. When you make it 7, so that's G7, it goes very nicely to chord number 1. Okay, so back to Danny Boy. If I want to just add this idea, because in a sense it is reharmonizing a little bit, because instead of playing just a simple triad, you're now replacing that with a 7th chord. Okay, so da 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 da, chord 1. We're going to chord 4, so I'm going to add a 7th. Da da dee da 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 dee da 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 dee. Chord 5, I'm going to make that a 7th. There's the 7th. Da 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 da. Here's a 7th because I'm going to chord 4. Da da dee da 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 da. So you see, just by adding the 7th on chord 1 when it's going to chord 4, on chord 5 when it's going to chord 1, you begin to add a little bit more color to your playing or to your original arrangement. Okay, so let's now talk about these diatonic substitutions that I referred to at first. So if I play chord 1, in this case C, right? My 3 notes that I'm playing in this chord are C, E, and G. If I play, there's a chord out of these 7 that shares the same notes, or at least most of the notes that are in the C chord. So remember I said I've got C, I've got E, I've got G. If I remove the C and I keep that E and that G, chord 3 is very similar to chord 1 because they share 2 notes in common, the E and the G. So C has E and G, but E minor also has E and G. Okay, so the only note that's different here is that E minor has got a B, whereas C has got a C in it. Okay, but in a lot of instances, these 2 chords can be interchangeable. Okay, so I can substitute my C for an E sometimes. Let's actually try that in Danny Boy, because we are playing that C chord for 2 bars or for 2 measures. So what if we go da 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 dee da 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 da? That could actually work. So I could play an E minor there if I wanted to. Da 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 dee da dee da da. How much you like that is really a matter of personal taste, but I think it works. Okay, so you could use that sometimes And you know what? You don't always have to reharmonize, actually. So reharmonization is a matter of taste and variety. So if you want to change the way you play, then you can add some of these substitute chords. Okay, so I could play, in fact, let me play the chords in my left hand so that I play the melody in my right. So chord 1, I'm replacing now with chord. That's beautiful. So already I've got 2 tricks under my sleeve. For this section here, I could have played, I'll add a 7th. The one thing I would encourage is just openness. So an open mind, I always think of an open mind and an open heart when it comes to music and to creating, even improvising. So fixed mindset might say, I like that and I hate that, or I prefer this to, but when you're learning, I actually encourage you to be more open to sounds. Otherwise, you're going to play in one particular way and restrict yourself to only the techniques that you like. But if you're more open, then you've got all these possibilities. And the listener, whether it's your friends or people you play with in your band or the audience, they've got no idea what you're going to play next. So rather have all these tools and then you can use them however you want and then let the people decide. Okay, so chord 1, I'm playing the 7th. That's option 1, or that's another option. Okay, so one of the first rules of reharmonizing there is I can always replace chord 1 with chord 3. And why? Because they share 2 notes in common, those 2 chords. Okay, in this case they both share the E and the G in common. There's another chord where the same sort of thing applies. So if I go to chord number 6, I'm going to go to chord 6 over here. I mean, I could have gone to chord 6 over there because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a little bit far. That's A minor. I've got an A minor right here. So I'm going to play my chord 6 from here. So I could have substituted my C with an A minor. And why? Because C has got C, E, G. A minor has got A, C, E. So the C and the E are found in both the C chord and in the A minor chord. So those 2 interchangeable. So what if I said da 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 dee da dee da da da? That works too. Oh, da. So we've now got those 3 options. Okay, either a 7th chord on our way to 4, or we can replace the C with an E minor or with an A minor. Okay, sometimes when you just play the basic triad, probably doesn't sound the way you want it to, but if you play it a little more creatively, you might get sound. So let's say I used some left hand patterns, but playing the same chords. So if I said that E minor sounded like it should have been that. So let me play that again. So that works. Or I could play. Okay, so that also works. So this time I replaced chord 1 with chord 6. Or this time I played a 7th. In fact, I did 2 things at the same time. I only realized after I played that I played the 7th, but in my left hand, maybe it's because I've been practicing this idea, I played the E there, and that works because the E is found in the C chord, so it's kind of like an inversion. Okay, in fact, the real name for this would be a slash chord, so we would call this C7 over E. So So on chord 1, remember we said we can substitute this with either chord 3 or chord 6. Okay, let me just show you another example of how this can be useful. Let's go to Amazing Grace. So if I played, so it's chord 1, right? So there's a long chord 1. Okay, so I'm going to replace that with chord 3. So that works nicely. Okay, and here is another C. What if I replace this with chord 6? So I could have done that, or I could have said straight to chord 6. Let me do that. Then chord 3. I'm going to add a 7th because I'm going back to chord 1. So I added a G7 there. Okay, so just using these simple techniques, I'm starting to add some color and to actually reharmonize, change the chords for my song. Okay, so it's not plain and boring. Reharmonizing, I also think, is probably best used when you've got one chord for an extended period of time. Okay, you probably don't want to overdo the whole reharmonizing thing. Okay, but it's something definitely worth exploring. But I would suggest mostly on chords that last sometimes for longer than a bar or a measure. Then that's the best place to do that. So let's go back to Danny Boy. So we had chord 3. Okay, so now I'm on chord 4. The rules that apply to chord 1 also apply to chord 4. Because chord 4, there's a diatonic chord which shares 2 notes with this as well, and that one is D minor. So chord 2, and why D minor? Because D minor has got F and A, and F and A are in the chord F. Okay, the only difference is I have a C, not a D. Okay, so anytime I've got F, I can feel free to substitute that with a D minor chord. So I'm going to try that actually in that F spot right there on chord 4 of Danny Boy. So I'm going to add a 7th here. I'm going to play D minor. That worked well actually. I'm going to try maybe using inversions, but same thing. Seventh. Here I could go to chord 1, but I could have also gone after that D. I've replaced chord 1 with chord 3. Why? Because those guys interchangeable, because they share 2 notes in common. Instead of going to chord 1, I could even go to chord 6. Why? They're interchangeable. And then now that takes me to chord 5. Okay. So I know some people prefer to have like lots of structure. In fact, I know someone once asked me to have specific examples for the things I do. I'm taking a slightly different approach because one of the things I want you to do is to almost get into my head so that you can see exactly how I'm thinking. So I want us to go through mistakes together. I want us to go through decision making together. Okay, so that we can see, okay, this works, this doesn't work, and this is why this works, this is why that doesn't work. And also, what better way to surprise ourselves as we play? Okay, so basically I want you to really understand my thinking process so that you can apply it to your own playing and to your own pieces. Okay, maybe someday I'll write some things down, but it's basically not my style. So if I had written that, sometimes I want to play C7, sometimes I want to play A minor, sometimes I want to play E minor. And that's really what we are trying to achieve here. Have all these different styles that you can play whenever, so that you're not restricted to always play it like this. Okay, so I'm actually changing to E minor. Chord 4, I'm replacing that with chord 2 because they're interchangeable. Chord 1, I'm replacing that with chord 6. Chord 5, I'm going to add a 7th to that because it takes me to chord 1. Chord 6, what if I do chord 2? I've replaced that chord 4 with chord 2. Okay, so we've covered diatonic substitutions on chord 1. So we said chord 1 we can either use chord 3 or 6. For chord 4 we said we can either use chord, in fact for chord 4 we said we can use chord 2 because they're interchangeable. On chord 5, so far we've said we can use a 7th chord. We can turn that 5 into 7. But one of the things that we could do as well, and this actually leads me to another technique, which is connected to these diatonic substitutions, but I like to think of these as secondary dominants. Okay, so but before I actually talk about secondary dominance, let me tell you what I was going to tell you about this G. So one common technique, which I won't go into too much detail about why you do this, it'll become obvious when I start talking about the secondary dominance. So whenever I've got G, I can also replace that with D minor. So wherever I've got chord 5, you can play chord 2 and then go to chord 5 if you want to. So let's say I've played instead of going straight to chord 5, I'm going to go chord 2. There's my chord 2, D minor. And then here's chord 5. Oh, and I've added a 7th to it. Chord 1. I'm going to, instead of going to chord 5, I'm going to play 2, 5, 1. There's my 2. So what did I do there? So here's my D minor, and there's my melody node, and then chord 5 is a 7. This is chord 5, there's the 7. Okay, so far I'm just dealing with the first section of Danny Boy. We're not even in the B section yet. Okay, but even when you go to the B section, these same rules apply. When you go to a different song, like Amazing Grace, same rules apply. Actually, I'll play a little bit of Amazing Grace. I'm going to be going back and forth between these two songs just to make the point hopefully clearer. So substituted chord 3, chord 2. I'm going to go to chord 6. Here I'm going to go to chord 2 instead of going straight to chord 5. There's chord 2, then 5, which I'll add a 7th to. I'm going to play a 7th here as well because I want to go to chord 4. Then back to chord 1. Instead of staying on chord 1, I'm going to substitute with chord 6. Instead of going to chord 5, I'm going to play 2, 5, 1. Okay, so let's summarize this, or rather the diatonic substitutions that we've mentioned so far. So we've said chord 1 you can replace or substitute with chord 3 or chord 6. Then chord 4 you can substitute with chord 2 And then whenever you've got chord 5, you can play 2-5. Okay. Now let's talk about secondary dominance, because that's another reharmonizing technique that we can use. So if I go to C, right? The dominant of C is G. Okay. By the way, every chord or every degree of the scale has got a theoretical name associated with it based on its function. Okay, so it's got a functional name. Let's summarize it like that. So chord 1 is also known as the tonic, supertonic, mediant. Chord 4 is the subdominant. Chord 5 is the dominant. Okay, so forget all that information. The most important thing to know for now is that chord 5 is the dominant. Okay, so chord 5 is the dominant, right? One way to see this is, I mean, if you're going down, if you want to go to chord 5, you simply have to go down, I guess we would call that a fourth, because from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, or vice versa. Normally we count going that way, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So G is a fourth down from C, but G is also a fifth up from C. Okay, so it's something that can be slightly confusing, but just know that if you want to find your dominant, you either go up a fifth or down a fourth. It takes you to the same place. Okay, so remember we said G is the dominant of C, and I mean, from the beginning of this lesson we've been playing a seventh on the G, okay, because we actually call this a dominant seventh. Why? Because G is the dominant of C. At some point we were playing a C7. This is also called C dominant 7 because C is the dominant of F. And that's why you can play that dominant 7, taking you to your destination. Okay. So, we've said G is the dominant of C. C is the dominant of F. Okay. Maybe to further clarify, if you look at G, if I go up a fourth from G, that takes me to C. What do I mean by fourth? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So if I go from G, G is the dominant of C. And then if I go from C, C is the dominant of F. Okay. If I wanted to find the dominant of G, in fact, let me play this G here. The dominant of G is D. And that's why it works very well to play D minor and then G. So anytime you've got a G, that's why this works, because you're going from its dominant to the dominant. Okay. However, in our earlier example, we're talking about D minor, but you could make that D major to really make it sound like the dominant. If I play this D as a 7th chord, so this is D7, this is the true dominant of G. So what if I played D7 going to G? So anytime I come across G in my song, what if I play that? I wonder what that might sound like. So let's go to Danny Boy. I'm going to play my secondary dominant right here, taking me to G. What a beautiful sound that was. Oh, I want to play that again. So I said, I think that worked very nicely with this substitution to A minor. And then now here's my secondary dominant D7 and then G7. So that worked very nicely. Okay. So this is the dominant of my dominant. Okay, that's why it's called secondary dominant, because there's your dominant, but before that dominant, you can have another dominant. I mean, you could actually go crazy with this idea, because you can have from D, if I go to the dominant of D, that's A, and I guess that's why that idea worked well actually. So I could have played it. So from A7 to D7 to G, it can take me nicely home to C. So what am I doing there? I am playing secondary dominants. Okay. So before this dominant, I played that dominant, and then its dominant is A. So A is the dominant of D, D is the dominant of G, G is the dominant of C. So there can be a chain of dominants there, you know. If I wanted to, and went even further down, you can also say, okay, actually E is the dominant of A, and then A is the dominant of D, and then D is the dominant of G, and then G is the dominant of C. Okay, so you could actually do things like that. Hello there, my music family and friends. I just wanted to take a quick break from the video, and I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. Now, really quickly, did you know that about 75% of the people that watch my videos are not yet subscribed to this channel? That means there's a chance that you're probably not subscribed either. So if you're not subscribed, please do me a favor and go and click on that subscribe button. That's really going to help me to continue creating content like this, and for this channel to do really well. So to keep this idea of secondary dominance simple for now, I'm going to play them just on the D, D7, going to G7, and then going to C. Okay, so anytime I've got a G, I'm going to try and play its secondary dominant. Let me try that in Amazing Grace, actually. So, alright, there's my 7th. Chord 4, chord 1. Here's secondary dominant, because I know G is coming just now. I'm going to make that a 7th. Now that takes me home. Okay, so that's a cool place to add a secondary dominant. In Danny Boy, chord 4, I'm going to add secondary dominant right here because I know G is coming. There's my G. Okay, for now hopefully it's making sense. I'm trying to just play the chords just so that I don't lose you, so you can see exactly what's happening. In real life, I might not be playing those triads, but I'll definitely be playing that idea, maybe with some sort of left-hand pattern. Okay, so that's how you'd use a secondary dominant. I mean, this idea can go far. So remember I said you could go as far as E, and then that can take you there. So what if I played, especially at the end of Danny Boy, on the Oh Danny Boy, you can already hear that bass line works very well. Okay, in jazz, this is actually known as the turnaround, because if you just go up in fourths, it takes you to home. So if I play dominance there, I have no idea what it will sound like. Actually, let me just play the simple dominant chord. So that works. Okay. Maybe I wasn't too sure about the first, but that works actually. What you could do sometimes, so let's say you don't quite like the sound of a chord. In this case, it's a major, so it's E major. I mean, what if you make that E minor? Would you prefer that sound? So what if I say, that worked there. So I just changed the one chord. But what if I change the D major to D minor? That might work as well. This I kept as an A dominant 7th chord instead of A minor. There's D minor. So that worked as well. Okay. So there's instances where you can either play, especially when you're talking about this idea of secondary dominance, sometimes you can play major chord, sometimes you can play a minor, and it could work. In Amazing Grace, you might have gone there's secondary dominant. What if I had actually gone okay, I would have to break that down what I did there. So I said I played an E and then an A. In fact, the melody note is this, but I'm thinking of a D dominant 7. Okay. And maybe, actually, here's one more idea. Okay, so instead of just going straight, remember we said we could play the 2 whenever we saw chord 5, right? Well, we've been talking about this C here, but what is the 2 of this dominant 7th chord? The 2 of this is G minor, actually. So I could play G minor going to C7. Okay, so I can actually replace a C7 with G minor, and then that will take me to chord 4. I'm just taking my substitutions to the next level. So what if I go G minor, then C7, then chord 4. Okay, so what have I done there? Just to quickly recap, before I play that C7, I'm allowed to play G minor if I want to, because that would make it sort of a 2-5 progression. Okay, right. So we've covered the diatonic substitutions. In fact, we covered the 7th chord as well. And now we've just covered the secondary dominant substitutions. One more that I would like to get into is what's known as the tritone substitution. So what's a tritone? So it's an interval of a raised 4th. Okay, so from C, my 4th is F. So if I raise the 4th or sharpen the 4th, that interval right there is what's known as a tritone. You can call it sharp 4, you can call it flat 5. As long as you're playing that, you're playing a tritone. So what does this mean? It means if I want to, particularly with dominant chords, with dominant 7th chords, if I see C7, I can substitute C7 with F sharp 7. So I could play that. I'm just playing an inversion of. Let's see where that might work. I'm actually going to play my 2-5. So I played my C, and then I played its tritone substitution. Tritone substitution. That was quite a nice way to go to chord 4, actually. Okay, so we started with simple ideas. These ideas are getting a little bit more advanced. Okay, but I'm just going to show you so that, I mean, for those that are ready for these sorts of ideas, you can go for it. if this feels like a stretch, just get your diatonic substitutions and maybe the secondary dominants first, and then when you feel ready, you can come and explore this idea. So substituting. Secondary dominant. Here's its tritone substitution. So from D, the tritone of D is A flat. There's A flat 7. Ooh, that takes me there. I've replaced the C with an A7. I'm gonna play 2-5-1. Instead of G, I'm gonna play its tritone. The tritone of G is C sharp, C sharp. Ooh, all right. So this is something that maybe you're gonna have to watch several times. Okay, but the general idea is, anytime I've got a 7th chord, I'm trying to play its tritone substitution. I'm going to try this on Amazing Grace. Let's just see if this idea works in that as well. So there's C7, tritone. I like that. I'm going to substitute. Secondary dominant. Tritone substitution of D, that's A flat. G7, I'm gonna play tritone. Ooh la la, mamma mia. So that was beautiful. There's I'm playing a 2-5 tritone substitution, because F sharp is the tritone of C7. Okay, so those are basically a few ideas to take any song of your choice, whether it's a hymn or a folk song or pop song, and then you can play it however you want to. I would suggest maybe, instead of trying everything all at once, you dedicate a period of time where you're just studying one of these techniques. Okay, so you can try it through different songs. I would also suggest initially that you do it in the same key, so you might benefit more, like I did Danny Boy and Amazing Grace in the same key. You don't want to say, okay, let me practice this idea on Danny Boy in C, but then I'm going to do it in Amazing Grace in F sharp. I mean, you can if you can, but if this idea is still new to you, I would suggest one key to start. Key of C is usually a good one for you to visually see exactly what's going on there. And then once you've got it, then you can try it out in other keys. Okay, but use whatever song you want. And as you experiment with this idea, please do let me know in the comment section how your experiments are going. Sometimes they'll go well, sometimes maybe not. And that's all fine, because when they don't go well, especially, that's part of your learning process, and that's how you eventually discover your own sound and your own style based on the things that you like. So it's always very important to remember everyone's on their own journey. So on your journey, figure out things for yourself and then incorporate them into your playing. Okay. And like I said, be open, but feel free to use your taste as well. If you've got any questions or any other substitution methods that you use in your own playing, please do let us know as well in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do so. I would really appreciate that. If you like the video, please give me a thumbs up, and I hope to see you in the next video.